If you like our short stories, please like, comment and subscribe for more. You can also support this channel by clicking join and becoming a member. Now let's begin. The alarm came first. Not the sharp, panicked kind. This one was low, layered, magical. The kind that settled into your bones before your mind could catch up. Hermione Granger was already moving. Her chair scraped back as the ministry atrium filled with raised voices and flaring wards. Red emergency sigils ignited along the marble pillars, casting the space in warning light. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look around. She reached instinctively into the evacuation basket nearest her desk and closed her fingers around the first portkey she felt. "Emergency protocol!" someone shouted. "Single activation only." The world wrenched sideways. Hermione barely had time to register the second hand gripping the portkey before the pull took hold. The sensation was violent. Wrong. Too fast. Too heavy. They hit the ground hard. Hermione rolled, breath knocked clean from her lungs, the taste of iron sharp on her tongue. Cold earth pressed against her palms. Damp. Uneven. Not marble. Not ministry stone. Not anywhere she recognized. She pushed herself up on instinct, wand already in her hand, heart hammering. "Get off!" she snapped, before she fully registered who had landed beside her. The man groaned and rolled onto his back, silver hair darkened by dirt, pale face twisted in irritation rather than pain. Draco Malfoy. Of course it was. He sat up slowly, brushing soil from his sleeve with deliberate precision, as if they hadn't just been violently displaced across Britain. His grey eyes flicked to her wand, then to her face. "Charming," he drawled. "Do you always greet your travel companions like that, Granger?" Hermione surged to her feet. "What did you do?" she demanded. Malfoy raised a brow. "Pardon? You grabbed the portkey," she said sharply. "You interfered with the activation. I grabbed the same portkey you did," he shot back. "Unless you think I orchestrated a ministry-wide evacuation just to inconvenience you." Hermione turned in a slow circle, taking in their surroundings. Trees. Dense. Old. No visible wards. No structures. The air hummed faintly with residual magic, unstable but settling. This was not a designated landing site. She looked down. The portkey lay between them, charred and cracked, its magic completely spent. Her stomach dropped. Malfoy followed her gaze. His expression shifted, not to fear, but calculation. "Well," he said quietly, "that's inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Hermione rounded on him. "That portkey was keyed for single use. It's destroyed." "Yes," he said coolly. "I can see that." She clenched her jaw. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I believe," Malfoy replied, standing now, "that we have been displaced due to ministry incompetence." Hermione laughed once, sharp, humourless. "This is your fault." "Of course it is," he said. "Everything usually is." They stared at each other, years of history crackling in the space between them. The war hung heavy in the silence. Accusations unsaid. Wounds unhealed. Hermione broke eye contact first. She inhaled, grounded herself. "Protocol," she said flatly. "We remain here until retrieval. Attempting independent travel could result in splinching or worse." Malfoy tilted his head. "You're assuming I intend to follow ministry protocol." She looked back at him then. Really looked. "You will," she said. "Because if you don't, you'll put us both at risk." Something flickered behind his eyes. Annoyance. Pride. Then, reluctantly, restraint. "Fine," he said. "We wait." The word settled between them, heavier than it should have been. Hermione turned away, already mapping their perimeter, already planning containment and shelter and time. Behind her, Draco Malfoy exhaled slowly through his nose. This was going to be hell. And neither of them knew yet just how long the wait would be. Hermione did not allow herself to panic. Panic was loud. Panic was messy. panic made mistakes. She moved through the clearing with quick, precise steps, wand angled low but ready, eyes scanning for anything that didn't belong. The trees were thick and old, their trunks dark with moisture, the air smelling of damp leaves and moss. Somewhere nearby, water trickled over stone. The sound should have been calming. It wasn't. Behind her, Malfoy shifted his weight and made a small, irritated sound, like the entire forest had personally offended him. Hermione ignored it. She crouched beside the dead Portkey and held her wand over the cracked object. "Prior incantato," she said. The Portkey gave nothing. Not a spark. Not a pulse. Its magic was gone in the clean, absolute way only Portkeys could be when they were finished. She swallowed. Kept her face still. Draco's voice came from behind her, too casual. "Well, are you going to lecture it back to life?" "It's burned out," Hermione said, standing. "Single use. It's ash now." Malfoy glanced at the Portkey, then at the tree line. "Then we apparate." "We don't," Hermione replied. He turned his head slowly, as if he hadn't heard her properly. "Excuse me?" Hermione pointed her wand toward the air around them. "Do you feel that?" He paused, expression tightening as he focused. The faint hum she'd noticed earlier became more obvious in the silence, like the residue of old spells clinging to the world. "A dead zone," he murmured. "Ward neutral," Hermione corrected. "Or ward scrubbed, which means it's either uninhabited or deliberately kept invisible." Malfoy's lips curled. "And you're sure the safest plan is to stay put?" "Yes," Hermione said, sharper than she intended. "Because the evacuation portkeys were keyed to retrieval. The Ministry will notice we didn't arrive. They'll send a team." Malfoy gave her a look that was almost bored. "You have a lot of faith in the Ministry for someone who's spent half her career complaining about it." Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. "This is an emergency protocol. There are procedures." "There are procedures?" Malfoy echoed, mockingly mild. "Yes, and in my experience, procedures fail when people start screaming." She took a slow breath. "Apparition is unsafe until we understand the magical field here. If it's ward neutral, it could also be unstable. If we splinch, we bleed out. If we land inside a rock, we die." Malfoy's eyes narrowed. "So what? We camp?" "We wait," Hermione said. "We follow protocol. We remain together. We maintain visibility. We conserve magic. We—" "You," Draco interrupted, "are not in charge of me." The words were flat, but they hit like a shove. Hermione stared at him, her patience thinning at the edges. "This isn't about you. It's about survival." "I survived," he said, voice low. When it mattered, the clearing seemed to sharpen. Even the air felt colder. Hermione's throat tightened before she could stop it. "And other people didn't." Malfoy went still. For a moment, Hermione thought he might explode. Instead, his jaw clenched, the muscle working once, twice, like he was biting down on something that wanted to escape. "You want to do this?" he asked quietly. "Right here, in the mud?" Hermione's heart hammered. She hated him. She hated how easy it was to drag the past into the present, how it snapped into place between them like a weapon. She forced herself to speak evenly. "I want you to stop making this harder." His laugh was soft and humourless. "Oh, Granger, I think we both know you've been making it harder for years." Hermione lifted her chin. "I'm not interested in your self-pity." "It's not self-pity," Malfoy said, stepping closer. Not aggressively, just enough that she noticed the distance closing. "It's reality. You look at me and you still see a 16-year-old with a dark mark looming over his head like a threat." Hermione's voice came out tight. "You were part of it." "And you," he replied, eyes flashing, "still think you're the only one who bled for it." Silence snapped between them. Hard. Immediate. Hermione forced herself to look away first, not because she was losing, but because she was going to say something unforgivable if she didn't. She turned back toward the trees and began mapping the perimeter with sharp movements. "Fine," she said. "If you won't accept protocol as a reason, accept this. The first rule of being lost is not to make yourself harder to find." Draco's voice was behind her again, quieter now. "And what's the second rule?" Hermione hesitated, then said, "Don't split up." A beat. "And the third?" he asked, like he couldn't help himself. Hermione didn't turn around. "Stop talking!" Malfoy huffed a laugh, but it didn't carry amusement. It carried something else. Tension held too long. Anger with nowhere to go. Hermione finished her perimeter check and returned to the clearing's centre. She drew a small circle in the dirt with the tip of her wand, then flicked her wrist. A faint, shimmering boundary rose around them, subtle enough to be missed unless you were looking for it. "Notice me not," Draco said, watching. "Protective or hiding?" "Both," Hermione replied. "It won't block an aura team, but it will deter anything wandering too close." Malfoy's gaze flicked to her, then away. "So you are useful." Hermione's eyes narrowed. "Careful, compliments might injure you." He didn't respond. He crouched, picked up a small stone and tossed it toward the edge of the clearing. It struck the invisible boundary and rolled back, as if gently redirected. "Clever," he said, almost grudgingly. Hermione didn't like the flicker of satisfaction that warmed her chest. She crushed it immediately. "We need to establish a shelter point," she said. "And ration anything we have," Malfoy straightened. "I don't carry rations. I assumed the Ministry would be civilized." Hermione opened her bag and checked quickly. Ink, parchment, a small emergency kit, a half-finished packet of mints. "That's it," she muttered. "Marvellous," Malfoy said. "We'll starve politely then." Hermione shot him a look. "If you're going to be useless, at least be quiet." His eyes darkened. "You don't get to call me useless." "I do," Hermione said, stepping closer now, her voice dropping. "Because the moment I try to keep us alive, you fight me like I'm the enemy." Malfoy's face hardened. "You still treat me like the enemy." Hermione opened her mouth. Then the world shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically. Just a faint tug in the air, like the space around them tightened. Hermione felt it in her skin, in the way her magic responded. A retrieval window. Trying to open. Failing. Hermione's pulse jumped. Malfoy felt it too. He went still, eyes narrowing toward nothing. "It tried," he said quietly. Hermione swallowed. "Yes." "And it failed," he added, voice almost flat. Hermione nodded once. "Which means they're looking." Malfoy's gaze turned back to her, sharp and assessing. "And how long do you think looking takes, Granger?" Hermione forced herself to answer honestly. "Longer than it should." The silence that followed wasn't an argument. It was the first moment they both understood the same thing at the same time. They weren't getting out quickly, and they were stuck with each other until they did. Hermione woke to the sound of movement. Not footsteps, not danger. Just the quiet shift of fabric and breath that told her she wasn't alone, and hadn't been, not even in sleep. She opened her eyes and stared up at a sky dulled by cloud cover, grey pressing low through the branches above them. For a moment, disorientation washed over her. Then she remembered. The Portkey. The forest. Draco Malfoy. She sat up sharply. Malfoy was already awake, seated a few feet away with his back against a tree, one knee bent, wand loose in his hand. He looked untouched by sleep, too still, too alert, like he hadn't trusted the night enough to rest. "Good," he said, without looking at her. "You're alive," Hermione scowled. "Disappointed?" "Relieved," he replied. "I'd rather not explain your death to the auras." She pushed herself to her feet and brushed dirt from her robes. "We need structure." Malfoy finally glanced at her, one brow lifting. We need coffee. We need rules, Hermione corrected. Clear ones, if we're going to be here longer than anticipated, which you still haven't quantified. Then we minimize risk, she continued, ignoring him. First, we do not attempt apparition. Second, we conserve magic. No unnecessary spells. Malfoy tilted his head. Define unnecessary. Hermione shot him a look. Anything you don't absolutely need to survive. Ah, he said lightly. So your wards are necessary, but my comfort isn't. Her patience snapped. This isn't about comfort. It never is with you, he replied. It's about control. Hermione stiffened. Excuse me. You heard me, Malfoy said, standing now. You walk in, you lay down rules, and you expect everyone else to fall in line because you've decided you're right. Hermione felt heat flare behind her ribs. I expect competence. And I expect, he shot back, stepping closer, not to be treated like a liability just because you don't trust me. She laughed, short, incredulous. You gave me no reason to. Malfoy's jaw tightened. I followed protocol. You challenged it every step of the way. Questioning isn't sabotage. Sometimes it is. They stood there, facing each other, tension tight as wire between them. Hermione broke first, not by backing down, but by turning away. This is pointless, she said, already moving toward the centre of the clearing. I'm establishing a base point. You can help, or you can stay out of the way. Malfoy watched her for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he scoffed softly. You really don't know how to work with people who don't worship you, do you? Her wand hand stilled. She turned slowly. I worked with people who tried to kill me. And yet, he said coolly, you still trust them more than you trust me. The words landed harder than Hermione expected. She opened her mouth to deny it, stopped, closed it again, because somewhere deep down, something in her recognized the truth of it. She did trust familiar enemies more than unfamiliar change. She hated that he'd noticed. I don't trust you, she said instead, firm. And I don't need to. I need you to cooperate. Malfoy's eyes flickered. Those aren't the same thing. No, Hermione agreed. They're not. She knelt and began marking runes in the soil. Stabilization symbols, subtle, precise. The kind that took focus and time. Behind her, Malfoy sighed. I'll gather wood, he said abruptly. Hermione paused. I didn't ask you to. I know, he replied, already turning away. You'd rather do everything yourself. She watched him stalk toward the tree line, irritation prickling her skin. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Hermione finished the last rune and straightened, stretching her stiff back. She glanced toward the trees, irritation sharpening into something else, something closer to concern. Malfoy, she called. No answer. Her grip tightened on her wand. She took a step toward the tree line, then froze as movement emerged from the shadows. Malfoy reappeared, arms full of branches, hair slightly dishevelled, a thin line of dirt smeared along his cheek. He stopped when he saw her wand raised. Planning to hex me? He asked dryly. Or is that your way of saying hello? Hermione lowered her wand slowly. You disappeared. I gathered wood, he replied, dropping the pile near the centre of the clearing. Just like I said, she eyed the stack. It was well chosen, dry, usable. You didn't have to go that far, she muttered. I wanted decent fuel, he said. I assumed you'd appreciate efficiency. Hermione didn't respond. Instead, she crouched and began arranging the wood, movements precise. After a moment, Malfoy knelt across from her. They worked in silence. Not companionable, not hostile, just careful. When Hermione finally flicked her wand and coaxed flame from the arranged branches, the fire caught quickly, warmth spreading through the clearing. Malfoy watched it burn, then glanced at her. You didn't thank me, he said. I didn't criticize you, Hermione replied. His lips twitched. High praise. She looked up at him, eyes sharp. Don't mistake this for trust. I wouldn't dare, he said quietly. The fire crackled between them. Hermione realised, with a faint, unwelcome twist in her chest, that for the first time since landing, he had done exactly what she needed. And she didn't know what to do with that. Night arrived without ceremony. One moment the clearing was dim and grey, the next it was swallowed by shadow, the firelight carving out a small, fragile pocket of warmth in a world that felt suddenly much larger and far less forgiving. Hermione sat on one side of the fire, legs drawn close, parchment spread across her knees as she recalculated retrieval probabilities for the third time. The numbers hadn't improved since the first. Across from her, Draco Malfoy leaned back against a tree, arms folded, gaze fixed not on her, but on the dark between the trunks. He hadn't complained. He hadn't spoken. That, somehow, was worse. The forest creaked and whispered around them. Wind threaded through leaves. Something small scurried nearby, then vanished. Hermione's magic hummed quietly beneath her skin, alert and restless. This area isn't entirely uninhabited, she said at last, unable to stand the silence any longer. Malfoy didn't look at her. I noticed. You didn't say anything. You didn't ask. Hermione exhaled sharply. You could try being helpful without being prompted. And you could try, he replied, voice calm but edged. Not assuming I'm deliberately withholding information, she snapped her book shut. If you have something to contribute, then contribute. I am, he said, finally turning his head. By listening, Hermione stared at him. Listening to what? To the forest, he said. It's settling. Whatever wards were scrubbed here, they're old. Dormant. Not hostile. She hesitated. How do you know? Because if they were hostile, Malfoy replied evenly, we'd already be dead. Hermione didn't like how reasonable that sounded. She glanced back at the darkness, then at the fire. The temperature will drop further overnight. We should ration the flame. Malfoy's mouth curved faintly. You want to make it colder? I want to make it last. Brilliant strategy, he said. Freeze slowly. She shot him a glare. Unless you have a better suggestion. I do, he interrupted. We maintain the fire at a low burn and take turns sleeping. Her stomach tightened. Sleeping? Yes, he said. You know, the thing humans do to avoid collapsing. I'm not sleeping while you're awake. His eyes flicked to hers. Then we're at an impasse. Hermione crossed her arms. You expect me to trust you? I expect you to trust Exhaustion, Malfoy replied. Because if neither of us rests, we make mistakes, and mistakes get people killed. The words were blunt, unadorned, uncomfortably true. Hermione pressed her lips together. Fine. We take shifts. Malfoy nodded once. I'll take first watch. No, Hermione said immediately. I will. Granger, I'm not debating this, she snapped. I'm more familiar with Ministry retrieval signatures. If something shifts, I'll feel it first. Malfoy studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable in the firelight. Then he shrugged. Suit yourself. He settled back against the tree, eyes half-lidded but not closed. Hermione turned back to her notes, jaw tight. She hated that he'd yielded so easily. Hated that it made her feel unsettled instead of victorious. Minutes stretched. The fire popped softly. The forest breathed. Why do you hate me? Malfoy asked suddenly. Hermione's quill stilled mid-line. I don't, she said without looking up. He huffed a quiet laugh. That wasn't an answer. She set the quill down carefully. You don't get to ask me that. Humour me. Hermione lifted her gaze. The firelight caught the sharp lines of his face, softened the edges she'd learned to associate with cruelty. It annoyed her more than it should have. I don't hate you, she repeated. I distrust you, and that feels different to you, he asked. Yes, she said firmly. Hatred is loud, Distrust is earned. Malfoy's eyes darkened. Then I suppose I earned it. You did, Hermione said, before she could stop herself. The words landed like a slap. Malfoy went very still. Say it, he said quietly. Say what you mean. Hermione's heart pounded. She hadn't meant to go there. She hadn't meant to dig this up, not tonight. Not when they were trapped and tired and alone. You don't get to pretend, she said, voice tight, that you weren't part of something that nearly destroyed everything. And you don't get to pretend, Malfoy shot back, sitting forward now, that I had a choice. You always have a choice. Not when you're 16, he said sharply. Not when your entire world is built to crush you if you step out of line. Hermione stood abruptly, anger flaring hot and sudden. Don't you dare! I watched people die too, Malfoy continued, voice rising. I lived every day knowing if I failed, my family would pay for it. That doesn't excuse— I know, he snapped. I'm not asking for forgiveness. They stared at each other across the fire, breath sharp, magic stirring uneasily. Hermione's hands trembled. She curled them into fists. I lost people, she said quietly. Good people. So did I, Malfoy replied. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, not resolved, but changed. Hermione broke eye contact first, turning back toward the darkness. I'm staying awake, she said. You should sleep. Malfoy hesitated, then slowly leaned back again. Wake me in 3 hours. She didn't respond. Time passed. The fire burned low. The forest remained quiet. Eventually, Hermione felt the weight of exhaustion settle into her bones. Her thoughts blurred. Her eyelids grew heavy. Behind her, Malfoy shifted. You're swaying, he said softly. I'm fine. You're not, he replied. Lie down, she turned sharply. I said, Granger, he interrupted, voice firm but not unkind. You don't have to prove anything to me, she froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, reluctantly, Hermione lowered herself to the ground, keeping a careful distance from him, her back to the fire, wand clutched tightly in her hand. Wake me if anything changes, she said. I will, Malfoy replied. Hermione closed her eyes, tension still coiled tight in her chest. She did not trust him. But somewhere, deep beneath the anger and the history and the resentment, she slept. And Draco Malfoy stayed awake the entire time. Hermione woke to hunger, not the sharp, dizzy kind yet, just the dull awareness of emptiness, the body's quiet reminder that time was passing whether the Ministry noticed or not. She opened her eyes slowly. The fire was embers now, a faint glow pulsing red beneath ash. Dawn filtered weakly through the trees, pale and cold. For one disorienting second, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She sat up at once. Malfoy was across the clearing, crouched near the boundary she'd drawn the night before. His back was to her, wand angled toward the air, as if he were testing something delicate. He hadn't noticed her wake. Or he had, and was pretending not to. Hermione pushed herself to her feet, every muscle stiff from sleeping on the ground. Her stomach twisted painfully. How long? She asked. Malfoy glanced over his shoulder. Since sunrise. And nothing? Nothing, he said. No signal. No flare. No shift in the field. Hermione exhaled through her nose. They should have found us by now. They will, Malfoy replied, but there was no certainty in his voice. Just repetition. Eventually, she moved to her bag and opened it again, though she already knew what she'd find. The emergency kit. The parchment. The mints. She stared at the packet longer than necessary. Malfoy watched from where he stood. That all we've got? Yes, Hermione said. Unless you're hiding a feast in your coat. If I were, he replied, I wouldn't be sharing. She shot him a look. Figures. He straightened and approached, stopping just outside the circle she'd drawn the day before. His gaze flicked to the packet in her hand. How many? he asked. Hermione hesitated, then opened it. Counted. 7, she said. Malfoy's mouth curved faintly. Lucky number. They're mints, Hermione snapped. Not meals. Calories are calories, he said lightly. She frowned. You're not seriously suggesting— I'm suggesting, he interrupted, that we don't pretend this is comfortable. She looked at him. Really looked this time. He seemed fine. Alert. Steady. No visible fatigue. Annoyance flared. You didn't sleep. I rested. You stayed awake all night, Hermione said. Yes. Why? Malfoy shrugged. Seemed prudent. Not noble. Not kind. Hermione hated that it still unsettled her. She took 1 mint from the packet and held it out. Malfoy raised a brow. You offering me charity now? I'm offering you half, she said flatly. We ration. He stared at the mint, then at her. You sure? He asked. Yes. You don't trust me, he said. But you'll trust me with your food. Hermione's jaw tightened. Don't make this into something it's not. He took the mint. Their fingers brushed. Just barely. Hermione froze. So did he. The contact was accidental. Brief. Meaningless. And somehow it felt like too much. Malfoy withdrew first, expression carefully neutral. Right. Rationing. They sat on opposite sides of the fire pit, chewing slowly, neither speaking. The mint burned cool and sharp on Hermione's tongue, doing nothing to quiet the hunger curling in her stomach. Once those are gone, Malfoy said after a while, we'll have to forage. Hermione nodded. I know. You know how? Yes, of course you do, he muttered. She shot him a glare. If you have a problem, I don't, he said quickly. Just stating facts. She looked away, scanning the tree line. We stay within the boundary, obviously. We don't eat anything unless I verify it's safe, obviously. And we don't wander off alone. Malfoy's eyes flicked to hers. You think I'd leave? I think, Hermione replied carefully, that desperation makes people unpredictable. He laughed softly. You think I'd abandon you to save myself? Hermione didn't answer. The silence that followed was sharp and uncomfortable. Malfoy stood abruptly. I'll scout. You just said— I'll stay close, he cut in. I'm not an idiot. She hesitated, then nodded once. Don't go far. He paused, then gave a shallow nod of his own before moving toward the trees. Hermione watched him go, irritation churning with something that felt uncomfortably like concern. Minutes passed. Then more. Her hunger sharpened. Her nerves followed. Just as she was about to call out, Malfoy reappeared, holding a small bundle of roots and leaves. Found these, he said. They're edible, I think. Hermione frowned. You think? They're similar to— Don't touch anything unless you're certain, she snapped. Malfoy's eyes flashed. I didn't eat them. That's not the point. The point, he shot back, is that I'm trying to help. Hermione crossed her arms. By bringing me guesses? By bringing you options, she stared at him, then sighed sharply and took the bundle from his hands. She examined them carefully, murmuring under her breath, running a diagnostic charm. After a moment, she nodded. They're safe. Malfoy's shoulders loosened a fraction. See? Don't be smug. I wasn't. You always are. He smirked faintly, then stopped when he saw her expression. What? He asked. You didn't sabotage anything, Hermione said slowly. You didn't lie. Malfoy's jaw tightened. Congratulations. You've discovered I'm not incompetent. That's not what I said. No, he replied quietly. But it's what you expected. The words hung between them. Hermione felt something twist in her chest. Irritation. Guilt. Something she didn't want to name. I expected. she said carefully. That you might put yourself first. Malfoy met her gaze. And instead, you didn't, she admitted. Silence followed. Not hostile this time. Just unsettled. They cooked the roots over the fire, ate sparingly, spoke little. The hunger dulled, but did not disappear. As the day wore on, Hermione realized something that unsettled her more than the empty stomach or the delayed retrieval. Draco Malfoy was doing exactly what was required. And the more he did, the harder it became to justify hating him quite so easily. She didn't like that at all. The afternoon dragged. Clouds thickened overhead, turning the forest dim and flat, as if the light itself were growing tired. Hermione sat near the fire, parchment spread out again, recalculating the same projections she'd already run twice that morning. Retrieval attempts, 2. Successful lock, none. She pressed the quill harder than necessary. Across the clearing, Draco Malfoy leaned against a tree, arms crossed, gaze fixed on nothing in particular. He hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. The quiet felt deliberate, controlled. Hermione didn't trust it. They should have tried again by now, she said, breaking the silence. Malfoy didn't look at her. Or they're dealing with something worse. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you, she frowned. Then why say it? He finally turned his head. Because pretending the Ministry is competent doesn't make it true, Hermione bristled. They're overwhelmed. They're careless, he replied calmly. And people like us fall through the cracks. Us? She echoed. Yes, Malfoy said. Us. Something in his tone scraped against her nerves. This is not a shared grievance, Hermione said sharply. You chose to work with them, and you chose to believe they'd protect you, he shot back. Hermione stood abruptly. You're impossible. And you're arrogant, he countered. You assume because you're calm, you're right. I am right, she snapped. I've kept us alive. He laughed softly, bitterly. You think I haven't noticed? She turned on him. Then stop undermining me at every turn. I'm not undermining you, Malfoy said, pushing off the tree. I'm questioning you. There's a difference. There isn't, Hermione said. Not when you do it like that. Like what? Like you're waiting for me to fail. Malfoy went still. That's rich, he said quietly. Coming from someone who's been waiting for me to. The words hit harder than Hermione expected. I haven't, she said. Yes, you have, he replied. Every time I speak, every time I act, you're watching for the moment I prove you right. That's not fair. It's honest. Hermione's pulse spiked. You don't get to accuse me of that. I do, Malfoy said, stepping closer now, voice tight. Because no matter what I do, it won't be enough. You'll never forgive me anyway. The line crossed before she could stop herself. Why should I? The words fell into the clearing like something dropped and shattered. Malfoy stared at her. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. His face went blank in a way that made Hermione's stomach drop. Then he laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, just once. There it is, he said softly. At least you're honest. Hermione felt heat rush to her face. Regret surged sharp and immediate. That's not... She started. You don't owe me forgiveness, Malfoy continued, voice steady but strained. I know that, but don't pretend this is about survival protocols or cooperation. It is about survival, Hermione insisted. No, he said. It's about punishment, and you decided long ago that I deserved it. Hermione shook her head. You don't know what I decided. I know what you see when you look at me, he replied. And it's never been a person. The silence that followed was unbearable. Hermione swallowed hard. She hadn't meant to go that far. She hadn't meant to say it like that. The truth, whatever version of it lived inside her, had slipped out raw and unfiltered. I shouldn't have said that, she said quietly. Malfoy looked away. No, You should have. At least now I know. That's not what I meant, she pressed. But it's what you think, he replied. And thinking it silently doesn't make it kinder. Hermione's chest tightened. You think I enjoy this? Being stuck here with you? Do you think I wanted this? No, he said. I think you wanted to be right. The words stung because they were close enough to truth to hurt. Hermione closed her eyes briefly. This is getting us nowhere. On that, Malfoy said. We agree. He turned away, moving toward the edge of the clearing. Where are you going? Hermione demanded. To cool off, he replied. Don't worry, I won't disappear. She hesitated. Stay within the boundary. He paused, back still to her. Always the rules. Then he stepped just far enough that the shimmer of her ward brushed his sleeve. And stopped. He didn't cross it. Hermione watched him stand there, rigid and silent, the space between them suddenly vast. Guilt gnawed at her, sharp and unwelcome. She hadn't won anything. She hadn't proven a point. She'd just reminded them both of the worst parts of who they'd been. Hermione sat heavily near the fire, staring into the low flames. Minutes passed. Then more. Eventually Malfoy returned to his place across from her without a word. He didn't look at her. Didn't speak. Hermione opened her mouth several times, closed it each time. I didn't mean it like that, she finally said. Malfoy's voice was quiet. I know. That made it worse. The fire crackled between them, the light flickering across two people trapped not just by circumstance, but by everything they'd never said. And the one thing they finally had. Whatever fragile balance they'd begun to build had cracked, and neither of them knew how to fix it. Morning came quietly. No alarms, no magic flares, just pale light filtering through cloud and leaf, settling over the clearing like an apology no one had asked for. Hermione woke with the taste of yesterday's argument still sharp in her mouth. She didn't look at Draco Malfoy right away. He sat where he always did now, opposite the fire, posture controlled, expression carefully neutral. Not cold, not angry, simply distant, professional. Hermione hated how much that stung. She pushed herself upright and spoke before she could reconsider. We need to reset. Malfoy's eyes flicked up. Reset? Yes, she said. Yesterday wasn't productive. No, he agreed. It was honest. She winced. It was unnecessary. Those are rarely separate, he replied. Hermione took a steadying breath. We're not getting out of here faster by dissecting each other's motives. Agreed. So, she continued, keeping her voice even, we function. Efficiently. No commentary. No provocation. Malfoy studied her for a long moment, as if searching for the catch. You're proposing a truce, he said. I'm proposing professionalism. His mouth twitched faintly. That's worse. She ignored that. We divide tasks. I'll handle magical diagnostics and retrieval tracking. You handle perimeter checks and foraging. And decision-making? He asked. Hermione hesitated, just long enough to matter. We discuss it, she said. Before acting, something shifted in his expression. Subtle, almost imperceptible. Fair, he said. They worked without speaking. Hermione recalculated retrieval windows, sending controlled pulses of magic into the air, measuring how the field responded. It was slow work. Careful. The kind that demanded focus. She was aware of Draco the entire time. Not watching her. Not looming. Simply moving with quiet purpose along the boundary, wand occasionally lifting, then lowering again. He never crossed her wards. Never tested them. When he returned, he set a small bundle of foraged plants beside the fire and stepped back. Safe, he said. You'll want to check. Hermione nodded, examined them, and confirmed his assessment. They'll do, she said. No accusation. No praise. Draco inclined his head once and moved away. It worked. That was the unsettling part. By midday they had fallen into a rhythm. Not friendly, not warm, but functional. Efficient. The kind of teamwork Hermione had relied on for years. She hated how natural it felt. She also hated how much calmer she was. When the retrieval pulse finally brushed against the clearing, faint, incomplete, Hermione felt it immediately. "There," she said, standing. "Did you feel that?" Draco was already beside her. "Yes." They didn't argue. They didn't speak over each other. They adjusted their positions instinctively, aligning magic and intent. The pulse tried again. Failed again. Hermione's shoulders sagged. "Still not enough." "They're closer," Draco said. "Just not close enough," she nodded. Agreed. They stood there for a moment, side by side, both staring into the space where help should have appeared. "You're good at this," Draco said quietly. Hermione blinked, surprised. "At what?" "At staying calm," he replied. "Even when things go wrong." She looked at him, startled by the absence of irony. "Thank you," she said after a beat. He didn't respond immediately. Then softly, "You don't assume I'll fail anymore." Hermione frowned. "I never—" She stopped, because she had. "I'm trying not to," she said instead. His gaze met hers, steady and searching. "I noticed," he said. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It wasn't charged either. It was something new, comfortable, in a way that made Hermione deeply uneasy. They returned to their tasks without another word. But later, as Hermione adjusted the fire and Draco passed behind her to add wood, their shoulders brushed. Brief, accidental, unremarkable. Hermione stilled. So did he. Neither apologized. Neither stepped away immediately. Then Draco moved on, and Hermione forced herself to breathe. Forced professionalism, she told herself. That was all this was. But the truth pressed quietly at the edges of her mind, unwelcome and persistent. Working with Draco Malfoy was no longer the problem. It was how easily it was starting to work at all. Hermione noticed it in the quiet moments. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just small, precise changes that were impossible to ignore once they were there. The fire burned steadier than it had the day before. The perimeter wards held without fluctuation. The foraged food was set aside in careful piles, already sorted by type and preparation time. She hadn't asked for any of that. She crouched near the boundary, adjusting a detection rune, when she felt the air shift. Not with danger, but with awareness. Draco Malfoy stood a few paces away, watching the shimmer where her magic met the ward-neutral field. "You can reinforce it there," he said quietly, nodding toward a narrow arc to her left. "The resonance dips every few minutes." Hermione paused. "How do you know that?" she asked. "I've been checking," he replied. "While you were recalculating." She straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. "You didn't mention it. You didn't ask. That's not—" She stopped, inhaled, and tried again. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Malfoy shrugged. "You were focused. I didn't want to interrupt." Hermione stared at him. "You interrupted plenty before." "Yes," he said. "Before." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She turned back to the ward and tested the area he'd indicated. He was right. The rune stabilized immediately, the hum smoothing into a steady, reassuring thrum. Hermione swallowed. "Thank you." Malfoy inclined his head once, already stepping away. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Later she discovered her bag had been moved. Not rifled through, not disturbed. Just repositioned slightly closer to the fire, where the ground was drier. Her parchment sat weighted beneath a smooth stone so the breeze wouldn't scatter it. She hadn't noticed him do it. She didn't know when he had. The realization unsettled her more than their earlier arguments ever had. "Malfoy?" she called. He looked up from where he was sharpening a small branch into a spit. Yes? Did you move my things? Yes, he said. They were getting damp. Her fingers curled. You could have asked. I could have, he agreed. But you were asleep. Hermione's breath caught. You watched me sleep. I was on watch, he said calmly. You were there. She didn't like the way that sounded. Too neutral. Too unbothered. I don't need you managing my belongings, she said. I wasn't managing, he replied. I was preventing damage. That's not your responsibility. No, he said. But it's helpful. Hermione opened her mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. She hated that too. The day wore on in fragments of quiet efficiency. They spoke only when necessary, exchanging information without friction. When Hermione paused to rub her temples, Malfoy wordlessly slid a cup of heated water toward her, brewed from leaves she'd already approved. She stared at it. I didn't ask for tea, she said. I know, he replied. She hesitated, then took it. The warmth seeped into her hands, grounding her more than she wanted to admit. This isn't a pattern, she said stiffly. No? Malfoy agreed. It's not, but it continued anyway. When she stood too close to the fire and singed the edge of her sleeve, Malfoy was there instantly, extinguishing the ember with a flick of his fingers before it could spread. When his hand brushed her arm in the process, both of them froze. Hermione's pulse thundered. Malfoy withdrew first, expression carefully blank. Careful, he said. I was, she replied, too quickly. He gave her a look that suggested he didn't believe her, then turned away. They didn't mention it again. As evening approached, clouds thickened once more, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Hermione checked the retrieval field again, frustration gnawing at her patience. Still nothing, she muttered. Malfoy stood beside her, closer than before, not touching, just near. They'll come, he said. They always do, eventually. She laughed quietly. You say that like you don't believe it. He was silent for a moment. Then, I say it because believing otherwise doesn't help. Hermione looked at him. You're not as cynical as you pretend to be. He met her gaze. Neither are you. The admission hung between them. Not an accusation, not a challenge, just an observation. Hermione looked away first. That night, as they settled into their respective sides of the clearing, she realized something that made her chest feel uncomfortably tight. Draco Malfoy had helped her all day. Not to prove a point. Not to earn forgiveness. Not because he'd been told to. He'd simply seen what needed doing. And done it. Hermione lay awake long after the fire burned low, staring at the dark canopy above them. She didn't trust him. But the certainty she'd once wrapped herself in, the easy conviction that he would fail her, had begun to slip. And she didn't know whether that frightened her more than being alone ever could.